Antinatalism, or anti-humanism, perhaps it should be called. Now, just before we get started on the philosophy discussion, when people in the West say the word philosophy by itself, because of, again, some sort of unconscious bias, they seem to mean Western philosophy. Yeah, I noticed it with an extended family member the other day. I noticed it on the YouTube channel Pints with Aquinas, and I'm sure there are many other examples. It seems to be some sort of bias. I don't know what it is, or maybe it's just a you know slip of the words. Maybe it's just an accident. It's not. I don't know what it is, but it seems very strange. So, again, back to that normal thing of assumption, assuming that everyone's your thing. So yeah, in the West, when they say philosophy, the word by itself, they tend to mean Western philosophy. They don't mean all philosophy. As in, they don't mean East and West combined, and they don't mean East by itself. They just mean West, but they say the word by itself and don't qualify it. Anyway, never mind about that. So let's go back to this. Antinatalism, anti-humanism. We're going to get back to this later. If there was a theoretical button. Now, nuclear bombs, exist in the real world. The button doesn't exist, obviously. If there was a button to end humans painlessly, it's so hypothetical that it doesn't matter. So you could say, well, it's such a fake argument. There's no point even having the debate. Well, yeah, that might be a fair enough point. But if you just do, pretend, go along, if you just go along with the scenario, just try and give it, what do they say, suspend disbelief, give it a chance, if you try and go along with the framework for a minute, would you, you know, it's very interesting, isn't it? I thought of that years ago when normal people were, having a go. When I was, well, say teenage, I can't give an exact, approximately teenage, but and I didn't know what this philosophy idea was called. I just sort of felt it instinctively. I was like, I think it would be better if it just stopped for everything because of how bad atrocities are that humans do. Although you do have to be aware that this movement, I'll say more the second one, is actually these guys. So, and the radical, what do they call it, green fascism, and the radical environmental, like the controlled side, the extremist side, and that. It's actually this. It's not humans. So it's human collaborators, but the ringleaders are, you know, uh, these entities. So non-human entities. So just be aware of that sort of controlled opposition. That it isn't like humans arguing with other like pro-natal and anti-human, pro-natal and anti-natal humans arguing with each other. You've also got these guys on the anti-natal, anti-humanism side very strongly because they don't like. So just be aware of that. It's not just like humans versus humans debate. You've got this. You can't leave that. I mean, you can if you want to be a sheeple and closed-minded and right-brained and in the box and all that. But if you want to actually like use your intelligence and your IQ, then it's these. You can't leave these guys out there because it is them a lot behind it. I've just noticed that. Not that I'm not that. I seem to be very on this. for my own reasons, but then that brings you on to that you can't have a fully neutral view of it, because any human debate can't be a fully neutral discussion or argument because of the genetics that you didn't ask for and the nurture and upbringing, again, that when you were very small you could have no control over. So every human debate is gonna be, you might try and get it 90% objective or 95% or 99%, but you can't get it 100% because there's always going to be an element. You can reduce this as much as possible, but you can't zero it. You can't get it to zero. So can so yeah, just be aware that on this side there's there's the human people that might have good intention, that think it's a good movement, but then there's a lot of these guys as well. So yeah, as I say, for the the very in the box mainstream uh, left-brained in the box rigid people, it can't. It wouldn't matter how much evidence came out for that. It would have to be, because it's a sort of, what is it, the physicalist materialism religion. It's a sort of faith-based religion. So, and they're extremists in that religion, so they can't change. But anyway, just aware for anyone that does have a thinking brain. It's a lot of ringleaders here on this side, and then so the argument that I see, but and normal people obviously specialise in assumptions, but the argument that I see is that, right, this is an assumption. So they would say you didn't choose. So what do you mean by you, first of all? The physical. Well, if they mean the physical worldly you, so you have to qualify what they mean by you. If they mean the physical worldly you, then yes. But if they mean you in a metaphysical sense, then maybe your non-physical body or your soul. Again, there's no way to prove this in either direction, and also you have to qualify what they mean by you. But providing you could qualify all that, again, there's no way to prove this statement that before, that you didn't choose to come. Again, if you qualify what you is, there's no way to prove. But if you say, okay, yes, you is the physical, this worldly physical, just this, and not the soul, or not metaphysical, or not non-physical, then okay, yes, you in that sense, the physical, limited, worldly, finite version, didn't choose. That is true, as far as we can understand. And also the problem with these debates in philosophy is that I try my very best, and it's extremely difficult even for me, and for 99% of people, they don't know anything about the non-physical because it's been shut off by, yep. So, that's the problem, as well as that there's a lot of ignorance with the debate because people don't know anything about the metaphysical, or again, 99% of the time, there are people that do, very extreme, rare exceptions, but it's not the general trend, and it's very hard to find those people to discuss. So, yes, if you qualify you as the physical worldly you, the human body, then that, you could say that didn't choose to come into existence. Although, again, you don't know that the previous thing, you don't know if that was like, you don't know anything about the previous life, past lives or whatever, or soul path or whatever it's, you can't really prove. It's hypothetical, because again, people don't know anything about the non-physical world and the metaphysical, and all that stuff, and other dimensions. Again, with very extreme rare exceptions, 99% of the time people don't know about it. So it's when the philosophical debate is happening, there's these assumptions made which you can't really clear up. So in a lot of ways, it's actually a subjective debate. It can't be a neutral debate because there's no way to prove it in either direction. You see, you can prove it either positive or negative. You can't prove it in any direction. So, but again, yes, if you, as far, all we can say is as far as we know in the human physicalist world, as far as we know, which again it requires faith-based, you know, assistance. Like, but anyway, if you just go along with that, say as far as we know, then you can say okay, yes, as far as we know, you know, this finite human in this life, forget about past, this incarnation, this human. If you look at it from that individual small scale, then it would seem again from if you look at it from this angle, it would seem that yes, they didn't choose to. And then you could say if you qualified all those again, it stays on it sits on assumptions. Then you could say that making someone born without permission is actually an atrocity. So I'd go further than Niall Hill, Anand, where he said it was a human rights violation, which it is. But you could say it's actually an atrocity. Because I mean, what are you subjecting them to? You know, the risk of, we don't call it that anymore, do we? We call it. Call it a different word. But it doesn't, I know normal people get more caught up in the word of what the actual thing is. We don't call it that anymore, but that's what it is. So you're subjecting them to the possibility of that, then that's one of the things. Then there's horrible medical conditions and etc. and etc. and etc. And all because of what, the parental narcissism, human narcissism, that you want to. Is it that misery loves company? Does misery love company? You want some other poor unfortunate soul to suffer this physicalist, world with slavery and genocide and tribal warfare, and like you want, like, that's megalomaniacal, isn't it? That is yeah, an atrocity. I would say it's an atrocity if, as I say, you have to make this assumption. But again, in terms of this solo person in this life, from that angle, yes, it's an atrocity to make them exist. But you have to qualify what you mean by you, or what you mean by that person. Is that person the soul? Well, then they're infinite. The human incarnations don't come into it, etc. But then there's this 50-50 idea that the metaphysical is the union of the non-physical and the physical. Again, it's both the positive and the negative are based on so many assumptions in the argument that it's impossible to be 100% objective. All you can do is try and reduce the opinions to as minimal as possible. So if you can get 80% neutral, that's good, or 85% or 89%, yeah, then that's good. You can only reduce the error as much as possible. You can't zero it. You can't get it to be nothing. So, but yes, and then fear of death here, and then you could say, well, if you've experienced non-existence before you were born, again, based on an assumption you don't know, that you went a past life incarnation or a god or etc. Yeah, um, it based on assumption, but you could say, again, as far as we know, which is a human assumption, we may have experienced non-existence before. So why are people scared? Why do people have the fear of death when they've experienced it before they were born? Again, if you go along with this assumption, which is not provable in a negative direction or a positive direction. So even my statement then of making a person born is an atrocity, which I think is completely logical and objective, but obviously, as we've discussed, it can't be 100% neutral and objective, because humans have genetics and then upbringing and an environment that they were very small and they couldn't control. So all those factors create a subjective thought process that is not neutral objective, it's very subjective. Yeah, so it's impossible. And also, you know, I'm very disgusted at the way humans behave, so that would be again a subjective, that's a very sort of emotional opinion, so that would be subjective. Yeah, although not completely. I mean, I suppose you could say like the disgust at this is emotional, but at the same time it's is it purely emotional? Maybe it is. Oh, it's the hypocrisy that disgusts me as well, that they can't even call it the real name. They have to call it a fake name, and they can't take any uh, um, responsibility the fact that they vote for it, because people want to say it's all the leaders' fault and it's all them that are evil, without the like millions that vote for them for this horrific situation. But anyway, which by the way is very interesting with people being hypocrites, because they'll vote for something that they would never do themselves, and they would also do it in a gang that they would never do themselves, but that's normal people, and they would advocate, you know, for someone else doing it but never do it themselves, you know, say with the death sentence, they would never do it themselves, but they'll advocate. And again, that's classic normal people. They always want to manipulate someone else into doing it, but they can't. They don't have the spine, the backbone to do it themselves. Which, as much as I'd disagree with, at least I'd respect it, because it's like you stood up on your own 2 feet and you had the courage of your convictions and you did it yourself. You know, so this manipulation that they have to do it, you know, second party or third party is disgusting. But again, that's normal culture. But anyway. So, yes, in a negative or a positive direction, you can't prove, and it sits on assumptions. Again, the pro-humanist argument sits on assumptions too. Neither of these are completely neutral, and even if they were, if you've got humans debating, there's always an element of that. You just have to try and get it to minimal percentages. Anyway, so yeah, you just get the best trade-off in the debate that you can. That's all you can really do. So, yes, you wonder why people are scared of it, and I am too, of course, and that's the reason why, you know, if you think about making yourself non-exist, you know, which may be the kindest thing God ever did in human history with all the atrocities, but I'll just plug this in. There we go. So, yeah, the option to non-exist that you can put upon yourself, again, considering all the atrocities in history, ancient Roman slavery, ancient Greek, uh, you know, Genghis Khan, like all these things. I know, and that's only the mainstream history. That obviously the winners write history, and the 1%ers and the elites and all that, they're in control. So there's like a ton, like 90% unknown information there. You know, that's been deliberately hidden to control people. Not that they need any much psychological force to control them. They're so dim, they would do it without that. I think there's too much effort put into that. But anyway, yes. This is a very happy podcast right now. Not, anyway. Whatever. I don't mind. I'm sorry. Too important, I think, not to talk about. So yes, you could say then fault and blame that say if the human, so if there's other incarnations or past lives or whatever, or the soul, then that's God's jurisdiction. Again, yes, even the atheist faith-based claim that there's a non-God, that is a faith thing that you're not proving scientifically, so it's still, again, these are all assumptions, whichever scale you're on, whether on the scientific scale, the religious scale, or 50-50, there's going to have to be some level of assumption made. But anyway, as far as we know, we need to take that into account. Otherwise, it just all goes to chaos, and there's no point having the debate. As far as we know, yeah, in this in this solo incarnation, these specific solo people, which requires very isolationist view, which again is an assumption, which is not necessarily 100% logical. As far as we know, so it's a matter of fault and blame. So you could say, well, the past life or having a bad soul or going to purgatory or anything, that's the jurisdiction of God, or the multiverse if you want to be scientific, the multiverse and the universe and quantum physics, whatever fault it is, it's the fault of this, whatever, whether you want to give it a sciencey name or a religious name, this, you could say, well, it's the fault of this, with all that wheel of samsara and the wheel of drama, as I would say, life, death, rebirth, the wheel of BS. But yeah, as far as we know, if you just take the isolationist view, that it's an atrocity to make someone born that didn't ask for it. Yes, I would think so. And then, see, the pro-humanist, the pro-natalist argument would say, well, it's wrong, blah blah blah. Okay, fair enough, but so why aren't you talking? So if it's wrong, so why aren't you talking about SP? Why are we not rallying against SP then? If it's wrong, to take humans out of existence. Again, you've got to be aware that these guys are very on this team. There's a very controlled opposition. There's people who are genuine, that genuinely, want to be authentic, that are on this side. There are humans on this side that think they're being honest, and like they actually are dedicated to it for the to try and be genuine. But then there's these guys who are manipulating this ideology to do bad things. So you've always got to know that. Yeah. But anyway, but then also in Eastern philosophy, and Alan Watts talks about this, and you've got the Tai Chi symbol, the Taijitsu, the yin and yang symbol, the black and white. I think it's called the Taijitsu, or Taijitsu, something like that. And that circle with the thing and the two dots. That symbol. Anyway, it's called the Taijitsu, but yin and yang symbol, whatever you want to call it. It's yin, Y-A-N, it's not yin and yang, it's not G. It's not yin, it's Y-I-N. Yeah, it's yin, Y-I-N, 3 letters. Anyway, Taijitsu symbol and Alan Watts and Eastern philosophy, and you can't have the masculine without the feminine, everything's coupling, but then you get into non-duality. So actually the coupling is just an illusion, an appearance, and in actuality it's oneness, it's non-duality. So you may have two sides of a coin, but in actuality it's one coin, even though there's two sides. So you may have non-existence and existence, but in actuality it's non-dual, it's oneness, you see. So you could say in Eastern philosophy that because a lot of this, when I listened to the debate with JP and the South African guy, it was basically a Western debate. didn't really delve, as far as I could see, and maybe I didn't see far enough. I couldn't see any, or barely any, Eastern philosophy in the debate. It was all a Western argument, using Western, um, you know, techniques and premises. And even when he brought up Faust again, that's from Western. It's not from Eastern philosophy. So, not that there's anything wrong with that. There's, gold mines of knowledge in the Western tradition. That's fantastic, but I would say it's incomplete, and it's, everything is, nothing's 100%, full, but you can't have non-existence. So according to the Eastern philosophy model, and this probably is true of science too, where they say energy cannot be created or destroyed, just transformed. But that's a current theory, and then in the future we'll find out more theories. It's just the best quality. That's kind of what modern Western science is, the best quality educated guess you can make, until, I'm not saying that with everything, maybe there are solid proofs of things, but with a lot of stuff, it's the best quality educated guess you can make without, with the knowledge you have at hand. And then in 25 years, 50 years, 150, you'll find out, maybe that was wrong, or maybe that was half right and half wrong, and then you can. So it's just the best quality educated guess at that present time. That's really the best you can do with it. In some areas, I'm not saying everything's, like 1 + 1 is 2, things like there's certain solid things, but there are certain other things, where they'll find out it wasn't completely true in the future. But that's definitely one of them. But yeah, so is it wrong? Yes, it's an atrocity, but then again, my thing is coming from a non-neutral, very emotionally charged, very bitter. But then again, you could say that for the optimist, you see. I used to think normal people were on Valium when I was a teenage, when I was doing my college course. They seemed so like unusually happy. Probably because like their culture tells them that, normal culture is the best thing ever all the time. So it kind of helps. And then when you're not in their culture, you're told you're the worst all the time. So it probably helps to be told your culture's the best, like constantly 24/7. Probably does help with morale. But anyway, yeah. I'll never know what do they call the optimistic happy view. I'll never know that view. That's not my view. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, just finishing points if we can. So again, the positive side of the argument and the negative side. So for and against. So they're going to lay on assumptions, and then again, if the debate's taking place in the West, then Western thought and arguments are going to be made. So it's going to be again subjective, because it's going to leave out Eastern philosophy. So it's incomplete. And is it possible for finite humans in the physicalist, materialist world to have a complete, neutral, objective debate? Probably not. Again, all you can do is reduce this to its minimal percentage. Whether you can get 80% objective or 90% that's good enough. It'll never be 100. So. Yeah, it does seem, as I say, just to give the finishing points on the thoughts here. It bringing someone into existence that didn't ask for it. Again, you have to assume they didn't, because you don't know that their soul or their spirit self didn't ask for it. But assuming, as far as we know, that human, the physical human, once they come in, they didn't ask for it, then it's an atrocity to put all sorts of horrific potentialities there that they like that's an unbelievable level of genocidal narcissism, I would say. Just to finish off, I'll give some people fuel if they want to be on the other side of the argument, and I'm sure a lot of young anti-natalist Westerners who are young anti-natalists, just write this down, young anti-natalists who are Westerners, or young Westerners that happen to also be the young ones. I'm not talking about maybe older. The young ones. I think it's probably self-guilt. So I know for me, I know on your channel, you talk about wanting a family and stuff. So I think a lot of it, and I think a lot of Westerners that are young Westerners, that are anti-natalists, I think it is probably, I don't know, either they just think in a very different way, or they are bitter about things, or a mixture of both. But again, can't get completely neutral objective. It's going to have a level of subjectivity, and so is the the pro-humanist argument again, which I'll never probably understand. But yeah, Westerners that are young antinatalists, it's self-guilt, probably, because maybe deep down they want a family and they're trying to alleviate themselves or rationalise themselves of their own guilt. But yeah, this is interesting. But then again, I would still say, even if they did it, and hypocrisy and all that's true about hypocrisy, it's still an atrocity. So then, even if they were an anti-natalist, but then they ended up having a kid by accident or something, or they just changed their mind for 1 second or whatever it was, it's like 1 + 1 is 2. Like, it's a scientific fact. So I would say, but again, yes, there's assumptions, and yes, there's subjective elements here. But here's another question, and quickly before it ends: how is it not an atrocity? How is it not? There's a question for anyone. I'll point the finger the other way round instead of saying it is, and then people can attack it. How is it not? This is one element of it. Then there's sweatshops. Then there's, as I say, medical conditions, illness, disease. Like, we can go on. This is the worst one. I think one of the worst things is that in the West they can't even call it the proper name. At least call it the proper name, But maybe deep down they're ashamed, which is good that they're ashamed, but then do something about the shame, But anyway. So, yes, before it ends in about 5.5 seconds, I'm just going to say, how is it not? There's a very good question for anyone who's an optimist or a pro-natalist, on that team. How is it not an atrocity? Almost a challenge for anyone who's a pro-natalist. How is it not an atrocity? Okay, bye.